you, but not wanting to preclude what comments are still coming in, like not. Is there additional signage?
I'm lost. So it might be the audio.
So one of them are going to leave audio.
Yeah, sure, yeah, for sure, yeah. And preferably, that one just needs to like that. And so. It's according to the cloud.
Yes.
Mr. Redigan, can you hear us? Mr. Redigan, can you hear us?
I can, but the quality is not great.
How about now? Can you hear us, Mr. Redigan?
That's better. Thank you.
All right, great. Mr. Chavez, we're good.
Thank you, Sonny, for patiently solving the problem. Robert Redigan. Present.
Present. Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Joaquin Sanchez. Do you see Joaquin on the
Let me
participant?
check in.
I saw that Joaquin raised his hand a moment ago.
I see him in the waiting room. I'm going to promote him to panelist. He should rejoin as a panelist in just a moment and should be able to. Here we go.
Present.
Joaquin. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The Honorable Michael Sanchez.
Here, thank
And Christopher Salcedo.
Sure, here.
And I'm Ed Chavez. Let's go ahead and begin with introductions. Joaquin, you want to begin with introductions, please?
Joaquin Sanchez, public school math teacher. And I am occupying one of the two independent seats selected by the State Ethics Commission.
Thank you. Robert Redigan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and everybody there in Vegas. I'm Robert Redigan, work for the University of New Mexico and function as the New Mexico State Demographer. And I'm one of the independent committee members appointed by the State Ethics Commission.
Ryan Cangelosi.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here in Las Vegas, New Mexico. I'm Ryan Cangelosi. I'm from Albuquerque, New Mexico, born and raised. And I work at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences. I'm the Director of Economic Development. I was appointed by Representative Jim Townsend. Ms. Curtis.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Curtis. I am the mother of four, grandmother of my three. I say my four little Hills. Family all from this area. So I'm hoping to see the Hills today in the audience. I'm a travel lawyer, in addition to being a mom and a grandmother for the last 30 years. I represent a lot of people up here and in other parts of the state. I was appointed by Mimi Stewart, who is the president pro tem of the Senate. And I love Vegas. I'm so happy to be up there and see all of you.
My name is Michael Sanchez. I am an attorney. Born and raised in Glen, still live there. I graduated from Glen High, graduated from the University of New Mexico. And Speaker Brian Eagle is the one who appointed me to this position. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Christopher Salcedo. I have a law practice in Albuquerque. Been in Albuquerque now 25 years. But I was raised in Doñana County. My wife's a middle school principal, and I also serve as a regent for New Mexico State as additional service to the state. So, thank you.
Thank you. My name is Ed Chavez. I am a native New Mexican, born and raised in Santa Fe. Grew up working small family ranches in Torrance and San Miguel counties. The one in San Miguel County was in Leyva, New Mexico. I don't know if you know where Leyva is. It's a very small community, but still there, very much so. And in Torrance County, La Palma. So that's my background. I've been married for now going on 45 years. I have 3 children and 8 grandchildren. Love our state. I've been retired from the New Mexico Supreme Court for 3 years now and have been trying to be active in our democracy. It's something that's very important for its citizens to do. And I look forward to working with this committee and drawing some maps that are fair and give you an equal opportunity to elect representatives of your choice. With that, the agenda. Have you all had an opportunity to review the agenda?
Yes.
We'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda unless there are some proposed changes.
I move to adopt the agenda for today's meeting.
I'll second the motion.
We're moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Unanimously adopted. Next item on the agenda is I wanted to make a few comments for the audience's benefit. Every 10 years, in the year ending in 1, New Mexico is obligated to redraw its districting maps based on official data, demographic, and population that we receive from the Bureau of Census. And this is that year. It becomes very important because over 10 years, populations change. They change on the basis naturally, obviously, but also people move in and out of New Mexico, and we move from within New Mexico and we change the composition of communities. It becomes important for us to draw the maps. In the last couple of decades, the legislature and governor have not been able to agree on redistricting maps, and as a result, they ended up in court, costing the taxpayers about $6.5 million in returning fees and costs. So this year, the legislature, with only 2 votes against it, decided to create this citizen redistricting committee. And the idea is for us to submit at least three maps for each district: Congress, the State House, the State Senate, and the Public Education Commission. We will submit those to the legislature as recommendations, and the legislature will make up their own decision as to how the maps will be drawn, whether to accept what we've sent or do something else. Under the law, we have to take into consideration population. That's very important. Except we also have to balance it with lots of legal, geographic, and demographic data. And so public input is going to be key if we're going to be successful in our endeavor as your committee. I've always looked at redistricting as a community project because you are the people who know your communities, and you are the ones who can help us draw maps that give you a full and fair opportunity to elect representatives of your choice. A representative that would reflect the diversity of your community, a representative that can actually maintain close and continuing contact with you, a representative that understands the needs and the interests of your community, a representative who also understands that you have reasonably similar needs and interests, and will take those needs and interests into consideration in a way that they can represent the majority of their constituents. I believe that if we as a citizens redistricting committee are to be successful and honor our democracy, we have to make sure that your input as members of the public is taken seriously. And the way we plan on doing that is we plan on having a lot of public meetings throughout the state of New Mexico. We want to meet with you. You happen to be the experts in your community. You live in your community, you work in your community, you know the interests and challenges of your community. You know what cultural, economic, social issues you have in common, and why you might want to be in a single district or why you might want to be in more than one district. That's the sort of information that we need to gather from you. We also intend to make sure that your input is taken seriously by documenting the public input. To begin with, we created New Mexico nmredistricting.org, a website where you can submit written testimony. You can even draw maps using a program called Districtor. And that testimony will be captured there at these public meetings. We will keep minutes. We record every meeting, and we will have every recorded meeting on our website for the public to go back to and listen to and observe. We intend also to make sure that your input is taken seriously by also proposing concepts for redistricting maps that we will circulate to the public and allow you to review them. And then we will have 8 additional meetings where the public can comment on the concepts that we are proposing. After we do that, it'll be time for us to adopt maps, but we're going to go back after those 8 meetings and rethink what we have proposed and ultimately adopt maps that we will recommend to the legislature. When we recommend them to the legislature so that you know that your input was taken into consideration, we will evaluate each map in writing that we submit to the legislature. We'll lay out why it complies with the Redistricting Act, federal law, what we did to preserve communities of interest, and we'll also provide a measurement of partisan fairness. Those are the ways that we intend to make sure that your input is taken seriously. You don't just have to show up at a meeting to give us testimony or to show us your maps. You can go on nmredistricting.org and you can provide the testimony there. Or you can show up both here and draw the maps. If you've drawn a map already on Redistrictor and you want to show it, we can arrange that here during this meeting. But we've also contracted with Lily Urban Vitella, and she will be the community liaison between the committee and the public. She'll not only help you if you want to provide testimony on the website, show you how to use Redistrictor, but she will also monitor, or I should say, help us make sure that you have an opportunity to come up and present your testimony so that what you have to say is captured on videotape. The agenda that we have today is structured to begin by discussing communities of interest. It's not necessarily drawing an entire district, but we want to talk about your community. You will tell us the story of your community, and we can take that into consideration as we start to think about what communities of interest to include within certain districts. We'll then go to Congress, and we'll look at maps for Congress. We'll look at whatever maps might have been proposed on Redistrictor. We'll look at existing maps. We'll listen to your comments about what you think or how you think congressional maps should be drawn. And we'll do the same process for the Senate, the House, and the Public Education Commission. But before we get to your public comments, Brian Sanderoff of Research and Polling is here. And he's going to give us a Redistricting 101 lesson so that you will see what criteria we must consider, what criteria we may consider, and what criteria we are absolutely prohibited from considering as we draw maps. And as he describes the criteria, I think it's useful to think about how that criteria really gives you an efficient or effective or economic representation. You know, can your representative actually travel within the district without going outside of its boundaries? Is it easy for you to organize? Is it easy for them to keep contact with you? And are they representing your interest and staying in touch with you continually? So look at this criteria in that fashion. I think will be helpful. After his presentation, if you have questions about redistricting, you're welcome to ask the questions. once we're done with that, we'll go straight into looking at maps and getting your comments. Right?
Right. Share the screen.
Yes.
So, yes. It's okay.
You try to share your screen?
Let's disable first.
Okay, here, 1 second. Let me make it. 1 second. Give it just a moment. All right, you should be able to.
Maybe, last time we got too big.
Yeah, pretty good.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Chair, committee members, members of the public, thank you very much. Brian Sanderoff, President of Research and Polling, and Brittany Poss from Research and Polling as well. She's the Director of Data Analysis Analytics. It's a key part of this process, as are many other people at Research and Polling. And we've been asked essentially to staff the process, provide professional and technical services to the Citizen Redistricting Committee. So that's what we're doing to assist in the process. And as such, I've been asked to just give a presentation, which we've given before. This one will be more brief, to cover all of the basics and principles of districting. And so when we think about redistricting, there are really 5 principles, guidelines that we should always keep into the back of our minds, sometimes in the forefront of our minds, about the process of how to go about doing it correctly. And when it comes to the first one, equal population. Equal population and minority voting rights, those are the most important ones from the perspective of the federal government. The federal government has told us that districts shall be equal. However, there are different standards for what is considered equal population. Everything okay? Oh, I'm sorry. There are different standards for what is considered equal population, depending on Congress and the legislature. And we'll talk about that. Minority voting rights. This is critical. They ultimately in the Voting Rights Act, Section 2, it speaks to do not dilute the voting strength of protected minority groups. And so we work hard to make sure we create districts that do not dilute the voting strength of the language minorities. We'll talk slightly more about that too. Contiguity. What is contiguity? It just means all the precincts within your district must touch, at least in one point in space. You cannot have 2 islands where your district, you can leave it and then come back to 2 islands. It must be contiguous, the precincts within. Compactness. Compactness relates to the shape of a district. If you see a lot of districts that look like snakes or pencils, then you might want to question that district to how compact it is. Size. Sometimes districts can get really large, but still be compact. Here we are in Las Vegas, New Mexico, a region that's in a way part of north central New Mexico and a way part of eastern New Mexico. And here the population density is not nearly as large as we see in other parts of the state. So when we talk about compactness, look at the shape, but the size might be massive because it takes hundreds of square miles to find 50,000 people to build a Senate district. So we will see vast sized districts, but because of equal population, we're required to have these large districts. And then there's communities of interest. What are communities of interest? What are your communities of interest? What are the things about your community that you share in common with your fellow citizens?
things that relate to your shared values or your interests or your economy or your culture or your language. What are the communities of interest? You know better than anybody. Factors also such as maintaining political subdivisions, keeping the neighborhoods intact, keeping the county lines intact, geographic features like the rivers or mountain ranges. So you might see districts that are super large. There's tension actually between these principles. You might want to maintain your county boundary, but to do so, you stretch the size of your district to make it large, to get down to the county boundary so it's not split. That will make your district less compact. So these principles play off against each other, and there are trade-offs. Sometimes different people in the room will have different opinions about those trade-offs. Who gets counted for purposes of calculating total population of your district? Everyone. The Census Bureau counts everyone. We are required to, when we're building equal population among the districts, to count everyone. Here you see your kids, citizens, non-citizens, college students, prisoners. Everyone gets counted when we're looking at total population. Where do you get counted? Well, you remember that census form. The census form asked you to fill it out at a place where you live and sleep most of the time. Back in the 1960s, there were some landmark court decisions to solidify the concept of equal population among the districts. Here they are. And under these court cases, the concept of one person, one vote, concept of equal population equals equal representation. If a district is overpopulated and it has too many people, then the people in that district are being underrepresented. Why? They only have one legislator, but they have twice as many people. So every 10 years, you adjust the boundaries of that district would shrink. So you have the same number of people as everyone else, and therefore you are able to be equally represented. So equal population among the districts. Now, what's happened to the population of New Mexico? Look at this. In the last decade, our population change or growth has been only 2.8%. We have 58,000 more people in the state of New Mexico today than we did 10 years ago. Our total population is 2.1 million people. There are two ways you can grow when you put it down to brass tacks. You have the number of people who move into the state versus the number of people who move out, net migration. And then you have births versus deaths. Unfortunately, we've had more people moving out than in. And the little growth that we have had is by more people being born than dying. But in order to change the migration issue, we have to find ways to build our economy so that when our children do graduate from high school or college, they can stay in our state rather than being forced to leave. But in this last decade, we see this very, very small growth. In fact, look at our growth this last decade at 2.8% and compare it to the two prior decades, 13% growth and 20% growth. So back in the 1990s, we were growing at a 20% clip. But we also had uneven growth. So not only did we grow a lot, but places like Las Vegas, New Mexico, and Colfax County, and Harding County, and Navajo County did not keep pace with the population. And as a result, there are districts in places like Roswell and Clovis that disappeared from the map because the population could no longer accommodate that number of districts. And you in rural New Mexico, north central, northeastern New Mexico lost representation in the legislature. This time, with the growth rate of only 2.8%, there's less likelihood of that happening. But what might happen is, since your area has not kept pace with population growth, some of your district boundaries, which you probably think right now are way too large, might get even a little larger to pick up more population to keep pace with equal population. So that's something that's a challenge for us. Here is, simply puts it in graphic form in a historical context. We see here, we became a state in 1912, but here it shows 1910, just because there happened to be data from the estimates. Look at our growth of our state since statehood, and look what's just happened in the last decade, how we have staggered. And skip this on statewide growth and focus more on your area. Regional counties, population change. And here we see, look at the right-hand column.
Is it possible to move the, okay, thank you, Senator.
Yeah, that's great.
So here are some of basically the counties in Northeast, including San Miguel County. The right-hand column shows you, these are estimates. We don't have the official census data for county level data yet, estimates. Look at Colfax County. We estimate that, or the Census Bureau does at least, that you've lost 13% of your population in the last decade. Curry County has been about stagnant. DeBaca County, 17% loss, Guadalupe, 9%, and so on. San Miguel County, 7.7% loss in population. But look at the decade before that, the column right before that. Back then, you only lost 2% of your population, now 7%. And so when you take it all together, this region has lost 8,000 people. So while the state grew by 58,000 people, this region that we're defining here lost 8,000 people. What it means is that when we look, and when the CRC committee and the legislature looks at drawing plans, some of your districts are going to have to even get a little larger to get back up to equal population. This is a challenge that we face. So you saw the population of the state at 2.1 million people. What's the ideal population of a Senate district for Las Vegas, for San Miguel County, for Eastern New Mexico? The ideal population of a Senate district is simply taking the population of the state and dividing it by 42. And you see that it's going to take 50,000 people to have an ideal population of a Senate district, 30,000 for a House district. So those numbers have gone up by over 1,000 for an ideal district, but yet your area has not kept pace with population growth, creating that challenge that we just spoke of. So we talked about equal population. We talked about equal population, but now we need to talk about what that means in terms of the standard. For the congressional districts, right? New Mexico has 3 congressional districts. There, the federal courts have said the population among those congressional districts shall be as equal as practicable. And that has been defined as basically 0 deviation. So what we're going to be striving for the congressional districts is having the 3 districts all have about the same population, plus or minus a handful of people. So nearly equal population among the congressional districts. But for the state, House, and Senate, we do have some flexibility. The districts don't have to be identical in population off that ideal. We have a leeway of about 10 percentage points, 10%, so that the smallest House district and the largest House district, the difference in population shall not be more than 10%. So for Congress, we're going to try to make all 3 districts about the same. For the legislature, some of the districts can be a little smaller, others can be a little larger, as long as they don't go beyond that plus or minus 10% in deviation. Minority voting strength, Voting Rights Act, Section 2. We're not going to get into all the legalities of the Voting Rights Act today. Suffice to say that the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act does protect Native Americans, African Americans, and Hispanic, language minority groups, racial minority groups from minority populations as defined by the Voting Rights Act should give minority population an opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. Draw the district in such a way that the protected minority group can elect a candidate of their choice. You've heard of racial gerrymandering. That's when a district is created that's funny looking. It looks like a snake. Here you see an example of one on the screen. This is North Carolina's famous 12th congressional district. What they did was they took all the African Americans living by the interstate, the 100-mile interstate, and just collected, made a 90% African American district and packed them all into one district. You don't want to pack, you don't want to crack. You don't want to take a minority community in Roswell and split that Hispanic community among 3 different districts so that they can't possibly elect a candidate of their choice. Compactness. Lots of different ways to measure compactness. None of the mathematical ways are perfect. But look at on the left-hand side, that's actually the Northern Congressional District in 1991. And frankly, it hasn't changed much. So you're looking at the northern half of the state, Las Vegas, San Miguel County, and Union County, Hidalgo County, Harding, they're all in that district. The northern half of the state is in the 3rd Congressional District. And then you see an example of a not compact district in Texas. Okay, there are traditional districting principles that we spoke about. The CRC has certain rules. The committee here, the Citizen Redistricting Committee has certain rules, and that rules derive from state law for the most part. Here are some of the rules. The CRC district shall be reasonably compact, like we talked about. They shall be contiguous. You can't have one district that has 2 different islands. It's got to be contiguous. They have to be single-member districts. Each district will elect 1 legislator. These CRC districts that are going to be recommended to the legislature shall attempt to preserve those communities of interest we spoke of, take into consider geographic and political boundaries, including political subdivisions, Native American nations, tribes, and pueblos. They shall be composed of entire precincts and may only be split those precincts if necessary to comply with the Voting Rights Act. The Citizen Redistricting Committee, notice those top ones are shall. This one, next one is may. They may preserve the core of existing districts. If they like a district, they can preserve the core. If they don't like a district, they don't have to. They may. And then CRC districts shall not. It shall not use partisan election data or voter registration data in designing plans, except to ensure that the plans comply to the Voting Rights Act. Also, the CRC shall not consider the voting address of incumbents unless to avoid pairing them or unless other districting principles will not necessitate the pairing. That's a bunch of tricky language. But the bottom line is the CRC can consider where legislators live to avoid pairing them, but not if it really violates communities of interest that are really important to people. Here's an example of a community of interest. Here you're looking at, look at House District 53. This is an actual House district. To give you your bearings, look at Chaparral on the bottom of the map. That's right on the Texas-New Mexico state line. Look at the vertical line that's bisecting this map. That's the county line between Otero and Doña Ana County. So notice that Chaparral in the circle below, it's hard to see, I apologize, is actually divided between Otero County and Doña Ana County. But what the legislature did 10 years ago was they ignored the county line and said it was more important to keep Chaparral together. Chaparral is an underserved area. It's not incorporated. They don't have a lot of high money people who are up there lobbying for them on behalf of their community. It is an unincorporated area that's isolated in New Mexico. So the legislature combined the Chaparral community on both sides of the county line. That district also has an air base in it. And guess what? The district did elect somebody who lives in Chaparral. Now, what we're going to do in the next slide is we're going to blow up that circle. We're going to blow up that circle there, and we're going to show the Senate districts. This is the House district. So here we've blown up that circle on the bottom half of the page. That's Chaparral. Still, the left-hand side is Otero County, the right-hand side is Doñana County. But look, notice that half of Chaparral is being put in Senate District 34, and the other half of Chaparral is being put in Senate District 31. So part of Chaparral is being represented by a district that's based essentially in Carlsbad. And so that would be an example of dividing an underserved community and perhaps not taking it into account. Did they do it on purpose? Probably not. They just had other priorities. So one of the things that this committee has asked us to do is to watch out for some of those underserved areas and try to avoid splitting them. And if you do, have a pretty darn good reason for doing it. Mr. Chairman, that would conclude the presentation.
Thank you. Does the public have any questions for Mr. Sandroff?
Or for Justice Chavez about the purpose of the committee or about the information about redistricting. I know there was somebody who walked in the door with a question. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but now would be a great opportunity to ask the question. No, okay.
No hands raised.
For folks who would like to make a comment over Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you should see one button that says raise hand. If you raise your hand, I'll permit you to speak and you can ask your question to the team. And Justice Chavez, right now, there are no hands at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, one, Keegan King. Keegan King, I'm going to allow you to talk. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Sandroff, for the presentation. My name is Keegan King. I am the co-chair of the All Pueblo Council of Governors Redistricting Committee. We appreciate your presentation today. One of the things that you mentioned in here was there was a discussion of packing and cracking. I guess one thing that I'm wondering is, as a demographer, how do you identify packing? What is that percentage for a district? And also in the state of New Mexico in 2011, Native American citizen voting age population was identified at about 65% to allow Native people the ability to select the candidate of their choice. What range are you generally working with? Is it about 65% or do you have a range there? So two questions, one on, what is that packing percentage to you? And also for different communities of color, what is that CVAP number? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The first easy out answer is we take it on a case-by-case basis. So here we are in New Mexico, where the Navajo reservation, I mean, you're talking Pueblos as well, but on the Navajo reservation, for example, I mean, if you were to build districts that were wholly contained in the Navajo reservation, you would end up with 99% Native American districts. And the Navajo tribal government has told the state of New Mexico in the past, no, don't pack reservation-specific districts. Create districts, to get to your other question, that the Native American population should be. Now for the 6 Native American voting age districts right now in the House and the 3 in the Senate, all of them are 62% Native American voting age population or more. None of them go over 80. Most of them are in the 60s and the 70s. And the Native Americans with the working group that you're now working with, but we worked with the working group 10 years ago, that's pretty much what they were looking for. Something 62, 63, 64. So if you're looking at 64, that would be something that we would see as very reasonable. And so for the audience, And for basically for Hispanic district, under many circumstances, you look for 50% voting age population or greater. For a Native American district, you look for 62, 63, 64, 65, because voter participation levels are lower and it takes a higher percentage of Native American population to give them a greater opportunity to elect a candidate of their choice. So we're still looking, you know, in our world, we heard the Pueblos, of course, are more challenging because the Pueblos are not as concentrated. So you have to combine like 7, 8 Pueblos together. And so we would still be looking at that 62, 63, 64%, even for the Pueblos. And we listen carefully to what you say with your working group and take that into seriously. The Citizen District Committee will take your number. I heard Leonard Gorman speaking of like the 64.8 number. And so we'll all listen carefully to what the tribal working group says.
Thank you.
So if you want to make a public comment, you can come and stand right in front of that little owl camera, that way we can see it. Zoom our folks and see if zoom out.
Say that again?
So if you stand in front of this little owl,
Oh.
right here, so it doesn't blind you, but that people can see the projector,
Okay.
so right here would be awesome.
Right there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm here concerned about a District 40 where I live in. If you look at the map of District 40 right now, it's kind of like what you mentioned about redistricting. I mean, gerrymandering. So what it appears to look like is there wasn't enough voters, so it's supposed to be, I think, 29,000, correct? So they decided to go over the mountain from Espanola over and catch a few here and a few there, leave Raton out. I ran as for representative in District 40, and I found out, I was educated and find out that the demographics are different, the economy is different. So I had to stop campaigning at Raton. Very few on this end that are voters. So you got like 4,500, 7,200 votes on the other side of the mountain. So we never have a chance in this district. Anybody on this side of the mountain has no chance of holding an office and representing their district. And many times, currently we're doing okay, but prior, they would forget about Mora County, Colfax. And that was the education I came through with by running for representative. So on this new redistricting plan, if you look at the Senate district, it's in a perfect location because it grabs in a lot of the same type of demographic or economy, ranching community, a lot of raising cows over the mountain, a lot of different kind of farming, which is, they probably need to have more of cows area in their district. It would seem more fair to allow us to grab maybe Clayton or Raton or a portion of that area, kind of like the Senate district is designed. That's perfect for our site. So that's what I have to say about the district. I hope that we can pull more voters, more numbers on this side of the Rocky Mountains, okay? The San Luis Cristo, the Pecos Wilderness. And even if we have to keep Pecos in, I'm thinking that makes more sense to pull Raton into this district because there's not enough population on this side. I understand that. So they had to pull some more population from over the mountain. But even if this district went into Taos somewhat, they're kind of in the same kind of type of voters that we need to make it fair. So that's what I have to say about District 40.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Okay, can we get your name, sir?
Gary Martinez.
Gary Martinez, and were you talking about Senate District 40?
No, I'm talking about House District. House District 40.
We could show it if you want, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
And Chairman and committee members, do you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Martinez?
Let's take a look at what it looks like now.
Okay.
Give us perspective.
We're good. We're gonna come back.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
It's one of my favorite districts.
yeah, I'd like to point some things out if I can.
That'd be great.
Great.
While you're pulling that up, and one of your folks have cell phones, if you mind silencing them, or if you need to take a call, if you don't mind taking it in the hallway.
So I understand that there's a low population, so it seems to me that when they district it, they redistrict, they kind of, you can see the gerrymandering process here. To bring in some more votes. There's very few votes here. They left out this piece. I don't know if they can pull in population over on this side. But the mileage just going through here, like here is where I found out that people on this side of the mountain really don't do the same kind of things or want the same types of things from their representatives. And it's hard for the representative that generally that's been on this side of the mountain for a long, long time currently. They generally don't come over to Mora County as much. This year, we've had some good luck with our representative with some of the monies that we asked for water projects. We have a different kind of water source here. It's a whole different type of farming and ranching than it is on this side. So the hard part of this is to try to get numbers, to try to get the voting numbers because of the low population. But they did cut this out 10 years ago. They cut that portion out. This makes more sense to keep that population in because these people want the same types of things different from this side of the mountain. So that's what I had to say about that district. And it is, you can see how get some more individuals. So they pull this in just to make the votes. I understand the population, but if there's some way we can even bring it in part of this area and then maybe part of this upper northern area.
So Mr. Martinez, are you saying that, I just want to know, I think we understand what you're saying about the difference in your community. Are you saying that you want 40 to change, or are you saying that you want your area to go into 42? What are you recommending?
Okay, my recommendation is to bring in this district here. But to get some population out of this area, because it's a fine line and it's really hard to find that line because these are the same, these are neighbors voting in a different district. But this area represents more of the plains cattle industry, different water, education, different kinds of education. So my proposal is to pull in more of the northern area and maybe find some population for this area, because this area right here is pretty much the same type of business and economy right in here. So my proposal is to take out part of Rio Rancho, maybe leave this northern area, take out bring in more population into this area.
Is it appropriate to address these issues as they come up?
Yes, we might as well clarify all we can.
Yeah, everything, I apologize for not remembering your name, but what you said, it's very reasonable. On the drive up here with Brittany, I was talking about House District 40. A couple of other interesting things you didn't mention is if you're running, you've got to sometimes drive through 2 other House districts before you get to another part of this House district. Exactly. You have to go through a mountain range and to go to Taos, either on the high road or through the mountain pass, and go through Taos to get to Espanola. So for those of you looking at the map, can you mess up something? First of all, look at your number 40, and now we're going to go down south to the lower fork. That is Pecos. That's the area we drove to get here today. So that Pecos is a district with Colfax County with Cimarron and Maxwell. Now look at the other fork where Reed is. Part of District 40, that's Espanola. That district is going into Espanola. So this is a district. One time I remember Googling the furthest part of the district to the front. I think the drive time was 2 hours.
Yeah.
And so we heard suggestions as to what to do about that. This happened because of the last 10 years and 20 years and 30 years, the population has not kept pace. So what happened to the northeastern House districts is they started moving toward Espanola to pick up population. If we were to go to, let's say, House 67, or maybe that, okay, look at this. The gentleman was talking about perhaps adding it to District 40, those areas north of it by Raton. But guess what? House District 67 has Raton in it above Maxwell, right? And then it has all of Union, it has all of Harding, it has all of Quay, and it's keep going inside if you can. And House District 67 skirts Clovis and actually picks up population in Portales. So what happened was, to save the two northeastern House seats, House 67, yes, picked up Raton, which the gentleman is saying belongs in House District 40, which we can't argue. But everyone kept stretching so that the seat did not disappear. A beautiful district could be drawn between Union and Colfax, Harding and Quay. And that's an option for you. But what would happen is you would lose a voice in rural New Mexico. So right now, the districts 10 years ago were stretched. So you still kept two voices, two districts, even though 40 admittedly had all of the weaknesses that you mentioned. So one idea is just to build a beautiful district of Colfax, Union, Harding, Quay, but then where you have two representatives, someone representing you in 40 and someone representing you in 1. That's the dilemma. Now, so the question then is, if we unify Colfax County and put Raton in your district, then 67 would probably be going down to half.
Yeah, I understand.
So we wanted to tell you the dilemma, and what the chairman was talking about at the beginning about the trade-offs that occur. Now, does that mean the committee wants us to try to find a way to fix District 40, but we wanted you to know the pressures happening in the population.
So do you see the population increase in any of these areas?
No.
Probably Espanola, yes?
No. Where the increase is in Leon, and that means 13 further south. So if we bring 64 and 63, so here's a state like that. So look at that 67 going down to Portales.
Well, that makes sense. That's. I mean, this makes sense all the way down.
Yeah, it does. Until it goes that far.
This would make more sense. Grab some Taos. I don't know what the population increases in this area.
Yeah,
but even portion of the Taos area.
It would make more sense to Taos than we crunch the Taos. The Taos.
So population anywhere in this area hasn't increased.
No, that was that slide that it showed. It showed even Taos is zero growth. We already was lost growth. So we're pushing the northeast region into the north central region to make up for lost population, rather than what they call crunching the seat.
Have you seen a decrease in population in Morrow County area?
They're all lost. We can pull up that slide again, but
Mr. Martinez. I know there are other folks who've also signed up to speak. Ms. Garcia, do you mind coming on down so we can pick you up on the camera and the microphone? And we're not giving folks time limits, right? But we also want to make sure we hear from all of our neighbors. Thank you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Justice Chavez, and members of the committee. I want to thank my fellow resident from Wada for bringing up District 40. So I would like to address the District 40 conundrums that you have, that I've observed for 20 years. This will be the third time that I give public comments on redistricting. And I understand the pressures of creating districts that are fair. My name is Paula Garcia, and I'm a resident of Wada County. I'm also the executive director of the New Mexico Civic Association. I served as a county commissioner from Wada for 2 terms. And I also, like Gary Martinez, ran for office in District 40. So I'm very familiar with that district. I'd like to start with that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Can we get that off and put it on camera? Which districts did you want to talk about?
First, I'd like to address the District 40 issue because just as a follow-up to what Mr. Martinez provided. And then I'd like to talk about communities of interest and how that plays a role in the district. So first of all, the District 40. A lot has already been said about the flaws of District 40. I remember the crunch that happened 10 years ago. We actually lost the district. District 68 was eliminated, and District 40 took up a portion of that. So I try not to be repetitive, but I think that the main issue with District 40 is that it's not compact. It doesn't have that compact character that makes it easy to have relationships with who you're represented by. And I think it's challenging because it's a rural area, but I think that the challenge that I had when I was a candidate running in that district was that all the communities were so spread apart. You have to travel through 2 districts to get to the other side of the district. To get from Mora to Pecos, you have to go through 2 districts. And you have to go through Tomas Salazar district, which is now Ambos to get before you get to Pecos. And on the other side, to get to Velarde, you have to pass through Bobby Gonzalez's district in Peñasco and Susan Herrera's district in Budo. And then lo and behold, you land in Velarde and you're in District 40 again. And then you have to go through parts of Española that become Susan's district again. And then you go to northern Upper Chimayo and Oaxaca, and then you jump across the Pecos wilderness and pick up Pecos. The only way to get from one end to the other of District 40, from Mora to Pecos, from Mora to Oaxaca, is to hike through the Pecos wilderness. There's no way you can drive. And I think there's some principle of compactness. I don't think that's an absolute principle. I think you have a lot of competing principles that you have to balance. But the other thing is that I think is important is communities of interest. And for District 40, I think what Mr. Martinez was proposing the possibility of bringing in some of more Colfax County. I think you have to look at a lot of options, but one thing to consider is that the Sangre de Cristos form a region that has cultural and social and economic similarities in the rural land-based communities. And these land-based communities have a shared history. They have a shared history of community land grants and of acequias. And those rural communities have a land-based culture that endures to this day. They have common culture, common land-based culture. I think that it's very distinct to the San Luis Cristo region, and representation that's based on those cultural similarities is very important. So in looking at District 40, other districts in this central northeastern region, I think communities of interest should be a very big consideration in how the district lines are drawn. So pulling in more of Colfax might not satisfy the communities of interest criteria. And I see the struggle in trying to pull in Peñasco maybe, or part of rural San Miguel County, but I think that those are things you have to consider. I'm working with the New Mexico Civic Association to look at this closely with the redistricting committee and to propose some things during this comment period that aren't quite ready to present to you, but it's something that we're looking at very closely and wanting to come up with some thoughtful recommendations to provide to your committee regarding communities of interest and the status. On the District 40 issue, one other thing I wanted to mention is that when District 68 was eliminated, it also separated Guadalupe County into a different district. And I think Guadalupe County was also put into the second congressional district. And so I want to segue into the third congressional district.
Ms. Garcia, can I ask you a question just about the house seat issue?
By all means.
So when you and the Executive Association are going through things,
Yes.
I you know, what you think about the impact on the other communities. So if you're pulling something out, you know, thinking about that, because obviously it's these are valid points. And how to, if we're taking from one, they have to take from someplace else, and you know what that residual impact is. If when you're going through this process, if you would think about that and comment about that as well, please.
Mr. Chairman, by all means, thank you for that suggestion. It's a difficult task that you have before you, and so many rural areas losing population and having to meet these principles, it can be very challenging to accommodate everyone's interests. With regard to these legislative seats that are in this northern area, the community of interest is something that's important to consider in terms of the social, cultural, economic issues. We have common concerns regarding infrastructure. Some of our needs are very similar. Unlike towns or larger cities, the rural communities rely on rural mutual domestic water associations. That you'll see in the coming years is going to be a very big political issue in the rural community, aging infrastructure. And so having legislators who understand those infrastructure issues is very important. With agriculture, we have a very distinct form of agriculture in the Aztecas. And it's a significant part of our economy. It might not be on the scale of southern New Mexico, but in comparison to the size of our economy in, for example, Mora County, Azteca agriculture contributes millions of dollars in market value to our economy. In Riobamba County, it's 18 million. In Mora County, it's 12 million. And you know, if we were opening a new business that generated $12 million in Mora County, we'd be doing a ticket parade and you know, doing ribbon cuttings. But here we are. I'm a rancher as well, and that is providing a portion or all of the income of several hundred or thousands of families in these respective regions. And so it's an interest that's really important to protect in rural New Mexico. These communities are also predominantly Hispanic, and we want to make sure not to dilute the voting power of the rural Hispanic population. So those are the comments I wanted to make about the legislative districts. Relating to the 3rd Congressional District, I'd like to propose that we protect the configuration of the 3rd Congressional District as a northern New Mexico district. I think it's very imperative that, especially the principle of not diluting the Hispanic vote, that the 3rd Congressional District continue to be a northern New Mexico district. Again, for the Hispanic, not diluting the Hispanic vote, but also the principle of communities of interest, especially the ones that I advocate for, which are the rural communities. The vast majority of the Aztecas are in our central New Mexico, although we are in the rural areas. For the 3rd Congressional District, Azteca communities have been able to leverage their voting power to affect policy at the national level. And, you know, like Justice Chavez, I'm very passionate about democracy. And I think that when you have a good connect between the communities and the elected representatives in their district, then you have a policy making that's responsive to the needs in that district. So that's one other piece of input that I wanted to provide today about the congressional district. And thank you for your consideration, and looking forward to being engaged in this process in the coming weeks and months. And thank you for coming to Las Vegas. Welcome to our eastern, our central New Mexico, to the norte. Thank you.
Any other questions from Ms. Garcia?
Mr. Chairman, just real quick. I just want to thank Paul for being here today, and let this committee know that she was and is a valuable asset to the legislature in terms of her knowledge of the Aztecas, land grants, and ranching issues. She is one of those individuals that legislators trust to tell the truth. And she makes no bones about loving her community in this part of the state. And I personally want to thank her. And I'm sure all the legislators do as well. Sometimes they don't know how, but she did a wonderful job and all as well. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you for that information. Thank you so much.
One last comment.
Yes, sir.
So is it possible to eliminate a district to correct this problem? Because what you're telling me right now, or telling all of us, is that it's going to stay the way it is because of the population. So we've seen a decrease in population, drastic decrease. Is it feasible to eliminate another district?
Would you repeat the question so that those on Zoom?
Do you mind stepping down there so we can pick you up?
Right here.
Right here, we can go for personnel.
Yes, my last proposal or possibility is a possibility, first of all, to eliminate a district at this point, because I'm seeing that population is decreasing every year. I see that the land mass is too large. So
The Constitution sets up the districts, and we have to amend the Constitution. So it won't happen this go around for sure.
Under a status quo oriented plan, okay. We didn't even receive the Census Bureau official data yet. The plans we're looking at today are the current plan, current in force. We'll be getting the new data. We think the estimates that we have are accurate. Under status quo oriented plans, these district boundaries will have to stretch even more. But that doesn't mean the committee can't consider other designs that can take into account some of the things that we just heard, to try and reconfigure the mishmash of districts that are there in a more appropriate way that conforms more to communities of interest. Frankly, though, as I said, we can draw a beautiful compact area that you might lose the voice. Right now, we're stretching into north central New Mexico to keep the voices. But is there a way to stretch the districts a little more, but reconfigure them that makes more sense for the communities? And that's what the CRC committee is all about. We're going to try.
thank you.
Mr. Lawrence, thank you so much. If there's any part of the map that you would like to pull up, they can. Otherwise, you can just come on down and share your comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is John Lawrence. I'm a part-time resident in Santa Fe County since 2016. I want to speak specifically about the congressional map. I'm a professor at the University of California in Washington Center, and I write extensively about Congress. I spent 38 years as a staff person in Congress. The last 8 years as the chief of staff and the Speaker of the House. So I have some extensive experience with not only the work of the Congress, but also I've been through a number of reapportionments and seen them, including Philip Burton's very creative one in 1980, which he described as his contribution to modern art. I really want to avoid those kinds of convoluted districts in this particular case. I want to make a couple of points. I want to reiterate, so I see this. I think it's extremely important not to make radical changes to the congressional districts as they've been arranged for the last 3 decades in northern New Mexico, which is essentially north, central, Albuquerque based, and southern. And I have some serious reasons for that, all of which are reasons that are community here. They have to do with community's interest and compactness. But there are also other practical matters. I know there have been discussions of reorienting the congressional districts north-south as opposed to or east-west. I think that's an extremely disruptive thing to do to a state, particularly a state where there's not been substantial demographic change. When you're given, for example, your allowances within the Congress, members who represent these very extensive districts are not given additional resources in order to travel, in order to set up district offices. They face very great challenges as compared to many districts in urban areas in the east, where you can walk your district in an hour. And to reorient a district in a way that brings in vast quantities of new people without a sense of community, without a historical connection to a district, to disrupt social, cultural, political alliances that have been made over a period of decades. I think it's not only disruptive, but has the context also of making it far more challenging for members to represent those districts and represent the diversity of those districts effectively. So I understand that. I think it's likely that there are going to have to be some movements within the districts. I think that to the extent to which there can be maybe some greater equity in terms of the geographic areas that are covered by a particular district, that would be helpful simply because these areas are so vast. But recognizing the specific challenges that members of the New Mexico delegation, as with many Western delegations, face in terms of the numbers of district offices, district staff, constituent services, meetings for town halls, and other type of constituent services, to reorient that and to redesign districts in a way that necessitate reintroducing themselves to vast new areas of the state without some compelling demographic reasons to do so, I think is really not desirable. I just want to finish by making one other observation, which is not often made, but I think it's really particularly important in a place like New Mexico, and where there are these distinct communities of interest. In the House of Representatives is really the only place in federal government where minority communities have a strong voice in the political process. In the Senate, there are vast numbers of minorities who are in states where they don't vote for the party that happens to win Senate elections. And they are essentially voiceless and are not well represented. It's only in the House of Representatives that minority communities, whether they be Native American communities, Hispanic communities, Hmong communities, or African American communities, have small enough districts that are able to articulate the particular interests of those subgroups. And so ensuring that the districts that you recommend for New Mexico allow for the representatives in these three districts to articulate those clear views within the Congress is really the only way in which you can ensure that they're going to be heard. Now, personally, I think we're lucky in New Mexico, we have senators who represent and speak for the diversity in the state. But that's not always the case in many other states. In many other states, 30–40% of constituents are essentially voiceless. And so making sure that there are people from this state who represent those consolidated communities of interest makes a contribution not only to New Mexico, but it makes a contribution to the functioning of Congress, and that's specifically the House of Representatives. So that constitutes, I have a formal statement which I'll glad to send to you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad to respond to any questions.
Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
You have
Got that for you. Over to me, that paper handout, if Ms. Ledger would like to come on down. I'll make sure there are copies for everyone, and he knows how to submit it online as well. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Honorable Justice Chavez and Chairman and members of the Commission. My name is Martin Ledger. I'm a lifelong New Mexican, lifelong resident of San Miguel County in Las Vegas. I went to University and went to graduate school at University of Texas, Austin. I was the executive director of the Las Vegas San Miguel Chamber of Commerce for 5 years. I worked at the Mexico Film Office as the education manager for 5 years and spent 18 years as a marketing manager, advertising manager at the Mexico Tourism Department. I was one of the team that introduced New Mexico Troop, launched New Mexico Troop. And in all that work, I traveled extensively throughout the state
and got to know every part of the state. The one thing that we say in marketing and in Mexico, it's such a diverse state. It's such a diverse state, and that's what we use in marketing, because it is. Even in San Miguel County, you can have a plain, you can have the mountains, you can have the canyons. That's why it's so popular from films here in Las Vegas. But also there's a lot of commonalities on the other side of that are distinct for different areas of the state. And so we can't forget that. So I'm here to serve as a proponent for the preservation of the Northern Congressional District as a community of interest. Per the Commission's definitions, this includes cultural bonds, like-minded, integrated economies, and a deep respect for each other. These interests, if you will, in the North have been forged, hard-fought in historical perspective, and built for Native American, Hispanic, and Anglo ancestry, who is today described as the North. But you are here today in Las Vegas, Mexico, which is a microcosm of the Northern community of interest. You have the Hispanic community from colonization, Anglos from the Santa Fe Trail, and then came the railroad with merchants and commerce. We all have Native American blood or relatives in us, or relatives from the native communities on the other side of the mountains. We are professionals. We are ranchers, we are artists, we are cowboys, we are small business owners, we are educators, we are farmers. Ultimately, we are Las Vegas. We are from San Miguel County, and we are the exact reflection of the Northern community of interest. We are the Northern community of interest. Every 10 years since the creation of the 3rd Congressional District, there is an effort to change the boundaries of our community of interest, to add southern counties, move northern counties to the south, and there are even present maps of this redirection project, creating a north-south district. There's no doubt that northern rural areas have lost population, just like the rest of rural America. But for the most part, our metropolitan area, okay, where has this population gone? For the most part, the metropolitan area of Albuquerque, there's a huge Las Vegas community in Rio Rancho and Albuquerque. And similarly, people from Tucumcari moved to Las Vegas, people from Raton moved to Las Vegas for economic opportunities. Would it not make more sense to make up the differences in populations, which this commission is tasked to do in small geographic areas in CD1, where our neighbors, family, and co-workers have live and work, instead of opening up huge amounts of geography with very small numbers. Our economic migrators are still our family and share our cultural interest. Just like let's meet Ultimo, which goes by that. His story was one of moving from San Rosa and Puerto to Albuquerque. That is exactly where our relatives, my brother's presently in Albuquerque, and everybody here knows somebody that lives in Rio Rancho or lives in Albuquerque. So they make much more sense to have, instead of having big chunks of real estate, to get these small numbers, is to pull in these people that already know who and what we are. As gerrymandering and voter restrictive laws are implemented across the country, I trust this commission to make its determination in the best interest of fairness, community, continuity, and community. Redistricting needs to be true to New Mexico. It needs to be true to our communities and derived from them. That's all I have on the CD3. But I would like to address one question on our District 70, which stretches down to Torrance County and leaves out a lot of San Miguel County. It leaves out not a lot, but a bit. It leaves out District 40, a little area of Rosiada, and then it leaves out the Pecos area. So, and that is also in District 40. So I know that's a very hard task to balance out the populations, but this is one area for District 70 could make up the numbers instead of having to go all the way to Torrance County. They could make up the numbers and have a true San Miguel district. I think that can give that some consideration.
Any questions?
Have you all drawn a map to say how far down or where in Rio Rancho you would gain that extra?
No, I have not yet, but I will submit one on the website.
Mr. Chairman, Brian, could you put up CD?
Actually, the numbers aren't coming out until the 16th, right? The census numbers. Right. After that.
I just want to see what he's talking, Mr. Chairman. I just want to see what he's talking about in terms of going.
Can you show them a little bit about what you were thinking?
Going down into to the CD1 area.
Wanting to see the House districts, Mr. Ledger, that's what you were referring to about District 70?
No, he's talking about
CD3.
CD3. Well, you have hard for me to read. Can you
Yeah,
blow that up a
there
little
might be
bit?
a-
Get into
Getting-
Retro.
Watch it, you might get motion sick. So
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, there's not all, there's areas where you see where you come down here in Bernalillo County. This takes a very small section, and this has to be an area that was added only to get the numbers. If you came across this way and made this more of a square and more of a contiguous area, you would make up more population than if you came over here and went all the way down into the southern counties and added, another, hundreds of thousands of acres into into the third district, or even doing it on the other side, which already steps all the way down into Gallup. And you can see it's just a little jagged district, part of that goes all the way down into Portales on this side.
And
And
Mr.
then
Chairman,
Gallup on this side.
Mr. Chairman, Brian, is that Rio Rancho? All that part that he's talking about to make it a sport?
That's actually in Bernalillo County, not San Juan County.
Yeah.
Right here.
Right, you can see the Bernalillo County, San Juan County line.
And also, Bernalillo and Placitas and these areas here, they have much more in common with the area up here than any of the areas down here to the south, on the east or the west.
So if I can restate what you're saying, tell me if I get it right. If the third congressional district needs more population, pull it from an area near Rio Rancho or where there's some trend, rather than moving toward Roswell.
Well, I mean, people from the north move to Roswell. And if they do, they move back.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it does make a much more sense. And we're looking at the district that Bernalillo, because it's not in Southern Wall County, it's in Bernalillo County. It's not part of the district, but yet this little piece of stuff here, and that the reason had to have been in order to make population quotas.
Right.
Did you have written comments? I'll take those and I can post them.
Sure, I'll give these back. I can also post them.
Do you want to post them on the website?
Yeah.
He's got some handwritten notes to serve.
I can take all my scribbles. Thank you.
Mr. Ledger.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So next we have an opportunity for Ms. Gallegos. Thank you for coming, Mr. Lawrence.
Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Gallegos, also known as Patricia Gallegos. Depending on what, where you're at and who you're talking to, right? So I live, my comments are more of a personal comments in terms of my family and my livelihood and that nature. I live in Rivera, New Mexico, which is Highway 3, right? My parents are from Cerrito, which is up in that area, and Villanueva, New Mexico, down Highway 3, off of I-25, here in San Miguel County. My parents got married after World War II and moved to Colorado because of economic reasons, and worked for the CF&I steel mill and had a small business and raised 10 of us kids. Once he retired after 38 years with the CF&I steel mill, he returned to Villanueva, New Mexico, which happened a lot during that time frame, in 45 and so forth and so on. So that left the kids over in Colorado, right? Because we're getting raised and moving to California, moving to Denver, moving out from that area. The majority of us came back to New Mexico after the folks retired and moved back to New Mexico. And as a result, I raised my daughter here in New Mexico and in the village of Villanueva. So all of the folks there were related. And so we did have, you know, it takes a village to raise a child scenario. They could run down grandma and grandpa's house and to the store where their uncle Pete owned the store, and or the street across the street from my mom's side of the family, the Luceros, and that was our livelihood. I worked for the state when I moved back here and retired after 20 years, early retirement. Worked for Department of Health, Behavioral Health Service Division, CYFD. I am a licensed social worker, retired, also went to Highlands after 15 years of being out of school. So going back to school was a little rough. I think there was more therapy than anything else, especially in social work. But so I raised my daughter. And so my daughter went to West Las Vegas schools. She also went to Highlands University and got her master's in social work as well. She wanted to go into art therapy, but it was, art. And I said, well, maybe art therapy, but not art. We can't make some money out of art. So she got her license and she moved out of San Miguel County. And she went to Cedar Crest, bought a home, has her own business in therapy and private therapy and doing well. Today's my 2-year-old granddaughter's birthday. And so again, just the storyline, right, of the families that they were, and what we do. And we always come back home. We always want to be around our families. We want to be around our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors, our relatives. And of course, nowadays it's a little harder to do that because everybody has to leave the valley, which we call Highway 3, to go to work. So whenever I went to work in Santa Fe, and I did some great projects, established promotor programs, supportive employment programs, all of these kinds of things. Whenever I left the valley, it was really hard because I knew those programs were never going to come back home unless we did it ourselves. And that's the thing about our community, that we put in the time and we provide the services and we do what we need to do for our own community. And that goes for economic development. That goes for a reintegration center that we started here at the county jail. We had a meeting this morning with HHS to roll out our, and hopefully establish a regional recovery center that's going to be part of the state hospital and behavioral health services. So we're really excited about that, but it is all of us, all the coaches, all the social workers, all the neighbors that do the work we do. So I wanted to share that with you. And now I am a member of the San Miguel de Valo land grant out there. I'm a part of the Behavioral Health Local Collaborative, working towards, like I said, the regional center. I am a state central committee representative for the county. I really appreciate the concepts of minority rights as people of color and primarily here in our community, Hispanic, Latina, Latinos in this area. We are people of our own, and as you know us, we're your neighbors and friends and relatives, but I just want to leave you with the concept that to leave things as they are, basically, and support the grassroots of this community, which you are farmers area, our sectors are important to us. So leaving Northern District needs to remain in Northern District. And I support the comments of Martin Becher and Paula Garcia. Thank you.
Other questions for?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Eagles. Yes, next we have an opportunity for Ms. Gonzalez.
Hello, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to address the committee and the group here. My name is Anita Gonzalez. I'm here as just a regular community member in my professional position. I am the Deputy Director for the State New Mexico MESA program, which is a pre-college education program. Also another personal capacity, I was a previous candidate for House District 70. So I guess my request or my testimony today is on behalf of District 70. So as I pulled up the maps earlier, just I guess my intent is here. Sure, hopeful, that was my intent. So yeah, I guess as a request or as an intention is just to keep the preservation of San Miguel County. So in running, this is a situation where the way that the geographic area of this district is compact, but it doesn't necessarily address maybe communities of interest that you were talking about a little bit. It's a very large geographic area. You can see this nice little dip here goes into about half of Torrance County. So not only speaking on behalf of the residents of San Miguel, but on behalf of Torrance County, often what I found is they just don't have the population down here to get a say. And so, and I guess oftentimes with my background in education is you do find that these pockets where there's very little population, they don't really have a voting influence, is I think they oftentimes just don't get a say in what happens in the region. And so that happens across all decisions that are made in, all seats here. Ideally, if I had to redraw my vision, also understanding the population numbers and how that also interplays. When you're coming in here, San Miguel takes a good chunk of the hit, on this end going into District 67, and then here where it's shared here, this is a weird kind of mix with District 40. I myself am literally right on the border between District 40 and District 70. In fact, I think my neighbor over is District 40. So when I was running, it was very clear to find, it was actually a little difficult to find the line as to where I was. And if I would have moved the property over, I'd probably be in a different district. And so, reiterating some of the comments that were here before, I also serve as a commissioner on our local Licequia, which travels through. And so you're talking about communities of interest. The Licequia that I serve on, again, two very different interests in two very different districts with the same purpose. So, we're a larger collaborative on the Rio Gallinas Licequia, which comes out. And so what happens is it's in two different areas. Fortunately, I love our representative in District 40 that has fought on behalf of the entire Licequia as it comes down. But when you're talking about communities of interest, I think that's something really important to consider. And if you're thinking about geographically lumping areas, I've heard the concerns of residents of Mora County. I think San Miguel carries a lot more similarities with probably other counties up here in northern New Mexico than dipping down into southern New Mexico. And so, just within agriculture, within economy, within culture, I would love to see maybe an area for a consideration down in here. Even though this is very large in geographic area, it does not carry much population. And so when I was trying to pay attention to the maps, they put them up, the population differences specifically in Torrance County, and it was, that one wasn't one of the numbers on there. So I was trying to just see if it had taken a dip here as it had in the other areas. So that is all I have for you today. So, just maybe just keep that in mind, especially, and again, 70 is not one that's Chuck, I can really see the divisions of those little pockets, and I know the local lines may not make a big difference if you're looking at a big map, but when you're looking at just, from my house, maybe 3 miles up into Montezuma, makes a really big difference because those people traditionally have just been ignored when they're talking about their vote or their, any requests that they have with, funding or just any concerns that they have. They're just a very little sliver of a much bigger population, but all those little cutouts do matter. So.
Torrance County lost 5.5%, something like 900.
Right, and just to add some perspective to that. So yes, House District 70 is based, its base, population base is Las Vegas and parts of San Miguel County. It loses other parts of San Miguel County as we just started, Pecos is 40. So it takes half the population of Moriarty and Estancia to make a Las Vegas-based district whole.
And those
It's
are
part of that whole notion of stretching the northeastern districts to not crunch another one.
yes, and those two areas that you mentioned, those are probably the only areas that are even somewhat population dense,
Right.
you know, within Torrance County. You know, so just even speaking on behalf of just representation for all and voice matters, you know, I don't know what this area, this meeting was extended to, but I would very much like to say that many ranchers, many rural residents of this area would probably have a say in that. And so some of the same concerns that people said earlier, you know, anybody running in this area really doesn't, it just doesn't match up with the populations of the seat of San Miguel County. You're talking about equal representation, and which this is literally half of a whole county that is being maybe not very.
Let's questions from Ms. Gonzalez?
I'm probably gonna ask the same question in every public meeting. So what, like, if you could pick your district, thinking about how it would impact, I mean, what would you do? Would you change 40? Would you change 70? Where would you?
I would change 70, but I don't know the numbers to know how it would affect others. You know, I would like to see San Miguel stay intact. I think that would be a great vision. Is to keep San Miguel together, possibly maybe extend more of it here to Mora, up here into that area. If we had to expand and gain population, as I mentioned, in interest, I think there are a lot more similarities with northern communities, maybe northern ranching and farming communities than there are with maybe the southern districts. So, and even with regards, again, you know, my role within education, the same similarities we see in communities, we also see in educational trends. It is very different educational trends down here than it is, you know, up north. And so just, you know, again, when you're talking about what we're talking about, you know, deciding for capital outlay, when you're talking about allocations for schools, you know, looking at the different capital outlay areas. Luckily in District 70 in particular, Estancia did get some items, the Moriarty did not. And so where does that fall? Where does Moriarty fall? I mean, literally the high school is right under the border. Does Moriarty get put into, you know, into which allocation does it get, or does it just get forgotten altogether? So.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Ms. Gonzalez, with your education background, they're also looking for education commission districts. So
and I was
check that out.
Well, I was looking there at the map, and so I mean. And again, in education, you want to try to stay as bipartisan as possible. But like, as I mentioned, the different areas, like, you know, I do see the benefit to having similarities like in the north and the south. Unfortunately, in our state, that's just the division that is just somehow created itself, you know, between, you know, whether it be, you know, just different demographics, whether it be cultural based, whether it be political, you know, differences. There's definite a north New Mexico and the southern New Mexico. I mean, even down to something as easy as mass mandates and how you regulate your schools. I mean, it's such a cultural difference between the two areas. So when you're looking at just the shape of how the educational maps are districted, they're more vertical versus horizontal. Yes. So you do change, like this district 8 right here encompasses, you know, all the way up here from San Miguel all the way down here into Otero County. And you know, there's just different needs in all of those areas. If you could lump them together, I mean, I would say again, more of a, this would lump better together, this would lump better together when you're talking about just different areas of just commonality, you know, and maybe the needs of their students. There's also different industries within here which help to support your schools, which help to support a lot of things that I think also do make a very big difference in those communities. Like, so right here, when you're talking about, say, oil mining, oil support, oil and gas, energy industry, they typically support any of these counties down here at the bottom, but then they go all the way, you know, up here to where these schools don't get a ton of resources here that are being supported by the industry on it as well.
We have a question.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and I think it's more to Brian and Ms. Gonzalez, I'm sorry.
I guess it's my meeting.
Brian, if you push 70 up, there is no room up north. There is no room because of the lack of population. And
Yeah.
you have to either push
70,
or
40, and 67 are all fighting each other for the same area. And that's the problem. There's just not enough population. And so all of them stretched, 70 was forced to stretch to Torrance County. Now, would it have been better for 40, for 70 to go up to 40 and unify all of San Miguel County and take it away from 40? Yeah, then 40 has to stretch deeper as Espanola. And again, we'll try working under your direction to come up with a better approach, but pretty much these three districts could all use some of the same population rather than stretching to areas beyond their common interests, like Torrance County or like Espanola.
So I have a question for you. So if San Miguel, which if I'm looking at the map correctly, if you took part of 67 from them and moved 67 down, that would fix that problem, right?
No, but 67's already in Portales. 67's already been stretched down, skirting Clovis and going into actually the town of Portales. And so before you know it, it'll be, what it would take is borrowing some of the excess population, Lee and Eddie, and doing a domino effect, trying to push some of the population up. But
And Curry is somehow immune from being part of all that when there's a population problem because.
Curry's, well, it's partly, yes, partly Curry has, there's a minority district based in Clovis that goes to Santa Rosa, Guadalupe. Guadalupe is a hard line here preventing San Miguel going down to Guadalupe. That is a minority district that's been protected by the federal and state courts since 1981. So that 63 is a protected district. Then in the other part, that's half of Clovis. And the other part of Clovis is a tight, predominant Anglo district. So Clovis.
Would that be true of 67 too? I mean, aren't if 67 became San, I'm sorry to just throw this out, but I mean, if San Miguel went into 67 and are the communities of interest, and not dividing them just around ethnic or racial lines, but I mean, would the community of interest in Curry County be a lot more similar to 67 than Torrance County is to San Miguel?
Well, first, a good part of Curry County is in the minority district. That's, I would think, probably the most protected Voting Rights Act district, given the numbers we're doing.
Okay.
The other part of, I mean, it really, there is excess population in Eddie and Lee. It's 67. There's no room for it in Clovis. It would be probably picking up more at Portales. Going another 20 miles south.
And maybe just throwing it out there as a bolder proposal, which this is even placed or not. You hate to in rural New Mexico ever consider, tossing out districts because representation matters. And as it is, within the state of New Mexico, you have your clusters of population within Bernalillo and within Las Cruces, Albuquerque areas. But is there ever a hope, for a future for a change to the formula to where you actually take into consideration square miles and then you have representatives, both senators and representatives that are traveling, such a huge large area to where, that's a very much bolder proposal, like, to where there would be accommodations or exceptions made for a larger geographic area, rather than, where one district ends up with, such a large chunk of space. That's just a proposal later.
Typically, when you see 4 or 5 districts all stretching beyond their region, it's because there's no longer enough population to accommodate those districts and their best communities of interest. That's what caused one of the east side seats to actually be eliminated last time, but it's still a pressure.
Mr. Salcedo?
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow up on this, I guess I see it the way it's been suggested. I think moving 70 up, moving 40 up, moving 67 down, all of that makes sense. The issue obviously then is 64. And it's not just 64, excuse me, 63, 64 could not move into 63 is really what we're saying. I think it'd be very beneficial, Mr. Chairman, if we could make an invitation to the community we're talking about in Clovis. I would really love to hear from them. I know, I guess it was Mr. Sanchez, I think was his name, what was willing to speak 10 years ago. I have no idea if he'd be willing to speak now, but I would love to hear from him because I mean, without that issue, which is a significant issue, I think this would be solved itself. So I would love to hear from that community. So I guess this is more to our help. I would, when we're in Roswell or wherever it is, I'd love to hear from that community and perhaps even Mr. Sanchez. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Pereira, can you see?
Bienvenidos a Las Vegas. Welcome to Las Vegas. Thank you for being here today. I want to speak to you specifically about two legislative districts, Legislative District 70, which has been spoken about at length, and also Legislative District 58. I represented Legislative District 58 for 12 years. It took up Roswell and Travis and Eddy counties. And I had Roswell, Dexter, Hagerman, Lake Arthur, and a piece of Carlsbad. So I just wanted to make the point that the population at the time that I became a state representative at that time, the districts were gerrymandered. So there was not a possibility for any minorities to serve in that district. And some citizens in Roswell filed suit against the legislature and the governor, and it went to court, and the court ruled in favor of the people. And that gave me an opportunity to run for office there. And I was the first Hispanic woman who was able to serve in that position. At that time, the population in District 58 had a 64% Hispanic population, and they had never had representation there for many years. What I am seeing now is that District 58 has a 67.4% Hispanic population and 28.6% white population. And so the Hispanic population is not getting any representation at this point in time. I'm saying they're not getting any, but they do not have the opportunity to run for office. And so I'm concerned that the same thing that happened in the past is happening again. It's not gerrymandered, it's a really nice compact district, but I'm still very concerned because there has not been anyone that is Hispanic or Afro-American or Native American who has run for that office. And it is a very difficult district. And I just want to make sure that when, I'm sure that it'll probably stay basically the same. And I don't know what can be done, but I'm very concerned that the Hispanic population is not getting any representation. And I still have a lot of connections in Roswell. I was there for 27 years and moved back to Las Vegas. As many other people to come back home. This is where my heart is. But I'm still very concerned about what's happening in that area in District 58. I feel that the Hispanic population is not receiving the type of representation that they would like to have.
Now going into District 70, I also ran for that district picture, but he isn't really that's a different time or other. But when I moved back to Las Vegas, I ran for that. And I really did find that going into Torrance County was like going into a whole different world. And so I'm very concerned. I really think that we need to make sure that we have communities of interest. The people that I spoke to in Moriarty and other places in Torrance County were wonderful people, but they had nothing in common with the people in the other parts of District 17. So I would like to reiterate what Anita has said, what Martina has said, what Patricia has said. Those are issues that are a real concern. We have to have people that are willing to go out and talk to people and do all those things while you're campaigning. But we also need to have constituents who can relate to the other areas of the same legislative district. And so I would ask you to take a look at that a little bit more carefully. I know it's a problematic area, but if you can do something to address that particular issue, communities of interest is very, very important. And District 40 is exactly as other folks have described it. And it also is a very difficult district to campaign in. So just to emphasize that for the community. And thank you so much for being here, for allowing us to speak. And I do appreciate your work. Senator Sanchez, it's nice to see you again in so many years. And so thank you so much for allowing us this time.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just had a question for Mr. Sandroff. So population in 70, how much of the population is made up in Torrance County versus San Miguel County for District 70?
Off the top of my head, I don't know. I could take a good estimate. So if we go to our slides, we can see, I think Torrance County has 15,000. County. 15,000. And so House District's got 30. It's got half of Moriarty and the rest of Estancia. So probably 10,000. Probably 10 of the 30.
10 of the 30.
That's rough. Just under 10. Yeah. So again, it's districts, Las Vegas district stretching into an area outside its community of interest to be able to maintain a Las Vegas district. All of them are stretching a little further than anyone 10 years ago or 20 years ago wanted in order to not eliminate one of them. One of those 4 seats were eliminated and all of them stopped stretching. And there would be more communities of interest, but one voice would be lost. But that doesn't mean we can't try to come up with a better approach.
Mr. Chairman, just looked it up in 2019, the population of Torrance County was 15,000. Maybe it might be less now.
It hasn't changed significantly.
It's 900 according to the estimate.
Yeah. So again, at the risk of redundancy, all of these districts that are stretching outside their community of interest, we have to stretch more. We can rejumble them, try to make it work a little better. Clovis, it's a hard line because of that minority district. But there is another Clovis seat. It's more, we're talking Voting Rights Act, so I can talk this way. It's more of an Anglo conservative seat in Clovis. Then the minority communities in Clovis are with Guadalupe County creating a district that's 57% voting age Hispanic. according to the numbers, it's still an effective district where Hispanics have an opportunity to elect a candidate of choice. The Clovis Guadalupe seat.
And what did you say the percentage, minority percentage was in the Guadalupe seat when you?
In
African American population and the Hispanic population?
The minority population, Hispanic,
Both together, because my question is a packing question.
it's not I can answer that question.
While he's looking for that, I can say the votes cast in 2020, District 70, 23%.
In House District 63, there's 0.7% Native American, 4% African American, 0.6% Asian. So there's not substantial non-Hispanic, and the Hispanic voting age population in 63 is 57.0.
So that's not packing to have a 74% minority district.
It's not 74.
Well, if you add the Hispanic, Asian, African American.
The Asian was 0.7%, not 7%, 0.7%. And the Native American was 0.8%, not 8%. And packing is, the courts look at packing relating to a single minority group. And the only time you combine all of the minority groups is if you can also prove that they all vote the same way. That within the minority groups, they vote cohesively. So 57, that district, at 57, that district is a swing district. Every other election, the minorities elect a candidate of their choice. That goes back and forth. It's not packed because like George Dodge was elected there. He's Hispanic. Now, named Terrazas, who's Hispanic, but he's not the choice of the Hispanic population in the sense of how the courts look at things. And then it's a swing district that goes back and forth. So the implication is it's not packed, helping one group or the other because it goes back and forth.
Great. Any other questions, members? Sure. All right. So we have Mr. Philip Martinez as well. He's not over to Mr. Martinez. Is okay. We're going to go to Ms. Kuna next.
What was the name again?
Ms. Kuna, CUNA.
Good afternoon, dear committee. Good afternoon, everybody here.
I've seen you on video.
Oh, yes. That's good.
Okay.
Now you see me in person.
Exactly.
So I'm here representing really what we call the new Americans, the population of Latino Hispanic that is becoming newborns, but at the same time has become rooted in the community in Mexico. And I just want to acknowledge for the last 20 years, we really have been able to develop the maps that we need. The core had depleted, right? And that reality is struggling a little bit when people talk about, let's not make as much of radical change, like other folks were mentioning. I think this is the time for bold change, because New Mexico had changed. In 20 years, New Mexico had changed. And if I'm here defining my community of interest, in 20 years, I was not able to vote as an immigrant. In 20 years, I moved from Santa Fe to Las Cruces to Las Vegas as a student. And in 20 years, I become a citizen and the rest of my family. Communities in New Mexico have changed. So the idea of creating just a slight little change in your maps that will not resonate who we are right now. It's clear that in the 2020 census, Latino population, Hispanic population increased. So I'm here asking you all, the CRC, to take this opportunity to go and look really detail those maps that are outside the status quo, outside the little changes, but it really commit to create a majority adult Hispanic district in Congress. That's what we need. We need our community to be represented. We need our community to be seen. And that needs to happen. This is the only opportunity that we're gonna have in the next 10 years. And I'm excited about this process, but also I wanna urge you all that through this process, if we really wanna engage our community, little details needs to address how our community have changed. Interpretation needs to be part of this need. Our community in Roswell, in Clovis, in Hobbs, in Portales, in Las Vegas, they speak native Spanish. We need the field work is changing across the state. They are part of our community of leaders. So to close it up, I'm going to continue representing this new America that is coming to also ask you to see us, to hear us, and to incorporate us in the maps. And for you to commit to bring as a need for the change of New Mexico, a majority adult Hispanic district. And adding the potential piece, because it's hard to mobilize the community to really understand what is happening. And we have been trying to translate for our community members what is redistricting, how to engage. And it would be lovely if you can bring that language justice when we are developing the maps of the communities. Thank you so much.
Any questions?
If you have any questions,
What is your name?
Eli Puna.
I do want to say for the public that when you look at Districtor, if you go to nndistricting.org, then you click on to draw a map, and we have translated it into Spanish. So there's a Spanish version on our nnredistricting.org, and we're adding actually the Navajo language as well. I think the voiceover was going to be done today. So we are trying to work with interpretation and translation services. And I appreciate their comments because I do think that people ought to speak in the language that they are most comfortable with, if they are most proficient with.
Can I ask one more question? Yeah, one more question, and what I really appreciate you being here. With the community you're talking about, is there a compact community of interest within, let's say, Santa Fe? And I'm making an assumption there is not in San Diego or central New Mexico, and I may be wrong. Santa Fe, just based frankly on what I have observed over the last few years, I'm curious, is there the community you're speaking of in a neighborhood, community within some part of Santa Fe?
I think it's not just in Santa Fe, it's in San Miguel County, it's in Las Vegas City. You see the population of young people here in Las Vegas, they are highly Latino, highly resident citizens, right? Being able to vote for resident. Like these, we're growing population as Hispanic and Latino across the state. But how it is possible that we don't have one district that is majority adult Hispanic?
I have a question about, I've represented New Americans in the Santa Fe area, but more oftenly in the Clovis, Roswell, Hobbs area, right? And probably partially because of the oil patch kick-up and stuff like that. I want to see those communities when we're down there, okay? Because if there are new communities down there that we're not used to seeing in the census population, it's going to be important that they come out.
Yeah, we will.
Thank you.
And Ms. Sina, I would just point out for you, the members of the public, if you look at the projector screen behind you, and you look in the top right corner of the district or website, which is the portal.
Yes,
In the very top right corner, there's you see it's been and you can transit the whole district of processing thing.
And the main request was to be part of this. For example, I have 2 members that I have to translate over there just to explain what is the process. That is what I was talking about in the interpretation to be like.
One interpreter skill.
Yes, because then now you're not isolated, you know, like you are being able to be part of the democracy and what we talk about, the engagement of community. So, and also it's gonna save me a lot of work. That way I don't have to answer. So that would be really nice.
We really appreciate that feedback. I know Member Sanchez and I and Chair Chavez, we are very accustomed to having translators in the courtroom.
Yeah.
Talking to our Spanish-speaking jurors. So
Yeah,
it's not
because-
undoable.
And then they feel more empowered to speak up and describe also how even I will feel more empowered because I have my accent, but I will feel more embraced in the process. So I will appreciate that.
What would be really helpful to our committee is if you would work with Lily and let us know when you understand or know that there's going to be a population that could use interpreter services. And we will do our best to try to get them there. And we might even ask you for interpreters. I'm used to court certified interpreters who are very good, but they also work for the courts.
Yeah,
So we'll try it out.
For sure, next meeting, Albuquerque, West Mesa High School, that you need interpreters for sure. Like, just in that one.
So that's everybody who signed up so far, but if you listened to your community members, your neighbors, your friends, and you were inspired and you didn't put a beautiful star by your name that you'd like to speak, we'd like to give you that opportunity as well. Any takers in the room? Ms. Paula, Ms. Garcia. And if you don't mind stepping back down to the. Okay, I just have a question. And then Sunny will go to Sue next. Thanks.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I have more of a question. The conversation's been so informative, and I can see how challenging your work is going to be. My question was for Brian, if you could explain how did 63 become a protected district, and what do districts have to do to be protected?
Okay.
That's a great question.
District 63 became protected in 1981 by a federal 3-judge panel who ruled that the New Mexico House plan devised by the legislature was discriminatory in different ways. The judge gave the legislature a second bite at the apple to fix it, and they didn't. So then the courts took it upon themselves, the federal 3-judge panel based in Albuquerque and Denver, to draw some districts. And they protected some areas that they thought that the minority district, to give the minorities an opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. And that was actually done before the Jingles case of 1986. One of them was House District 63, the other one was House District 58 that Barbara Casey spoke. So it's derived from the federal courts drawing it. Now, was it drawn differently back then? Yes. The strategy was to put the minority community in the air base because the air base didn't have a lot of voters and it would increase the chance of minorities elected in the choice. So the district has evolved over time, but it's a Clovis-based district that goes to Santa Rosa and gets the minority percentage up to the numbers we said earlier. It was done in 1981. Then it was kept by the legislature in 1991. And in the state courts, the chairman said the state judges chose the plans in 2001 and 2011. They maintained it as well. So 63, 58, House District 58, Roswell 63, those go back to 1981. The federal judge and future legislature and future state judges maintaining them. They have changed over time, and they're looked because the population shifts. Clovis didn't keep pace with population, so it started moving toward Guadalupe County.
Okay.
That's why.
That gets to my question, because I have a vital interest in Guadalupe County.
It's 85% Hispanic, and the only way we were able to maintain the majority voting age population as Clovis didn't keep pace with population, it was moving to Santa Rosa.
Okay, I appreciate that background. The reason I bring it up is that in my work in Guadalupe County, they seem to have more in common with rural San Miguel County as rural communities, because you've got Anton Chico, Tecolotito, and places like that that are lumped in with Clovis. And I think Clovis has to be protected, but there's a cost, there's trade-offs, right? When you make those lines up. And I think that the negative end of the trade-off of the protected district for Clovis has been rural San Miguel County has lost some important villages. And these are small populations, but they make a big difference in how political representation plays out in these rural areas.
And sometimes a legislator was selected who's based in Santa Rosa. So.
That's right. Right. Yeah, it's gone both ways.
Right.
In Santa Rosa, Anton Chico,
Right.
it's an art. It's not clear cut. But Santa Rosa, Anton Chico, there's connection.
Right.
And the Anton Chico, Clovis, not so much.
Right.
But I appreciate the information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Last call for comments or questions in the room. Beautiful Sunny, is there anybody online who'd like to weigh in?
So I don't see any hands raised at the moment, but I would remind folks that if you hover your mouse over your Zoom screen, you'll see one button at the bottom that says raise hand. If you raise your hand, I'll call on you and you can provide public comment. Alternatively, if you're calling in from a phone, you'd press *9 to indicate that you'd like to provide a public comment. But Justice Chavez, I don't see any hands at the moment right now, but we could give it a minute.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask that we just take about a 10-minute break to see if anybody.
Yeah, let's take 15 minutes. So it's almost 5:15, we turn at 5:30.
That's good. Justice Chavez, the mic is now back on. Good to go whenever you want.
Okay, we are back in session. And Sonny, would you check to see if there are any raised hands on Zoom?
Justice Chavez, at the moment, there are no hands raised. Oh, you just got one, right as I said that. All right. It's Gilbert and Nancy Quintana. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to talk. You can unmute whenever you like.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You want me to identify myself?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
For the record, my name is Gilbert Quintana, and I am a resident of Mora County. And specifically, my precinct of voting is Precinct 3 in Holman, New Mexico. I've been voting every election I've had as long as I've been old enough to vote. And I've seen a lot of redistricting plans occur in my community here in north central New Mexico. And I imagine you'd want me to speak. I don't know. I barely tuned in, so I haven't looked at any of the information, but I could speak to the issue around Congressional District 3 and state representative districts and state senate districts, because those are the primary ones that will be, I guess, considered in this redistricting plan. Am I correct?
Yes, Mr. Quintana, if you'd like, why don't you start with Congress, and then after we're done with Congress, we'll go to Senate and House. Is that okay?
That'd be fine.
Okay.
Okay. Regarding Congressional District 3, my opinion of all these years I've voted in the district is that it's a favorable district. It is a good composite of both major political parties. It is also a good composite of people of different ethnic backgrounds and social economic backgrounds. And I think that Congressional District 3 does truly represent me as its current fit. In northern New Mexico, we often refer to one another as norteños, and the district is composed of norteños, and we like to see that district in its composure stay and remain the same as it is currently. I don't see no need to redistrict Congressional District 3.
Okay. Any questions, Mr. Quintana, regarding the Congressional District 3?
Mr. Quintana, this is Lisa Curtis. How long did you say you've been voting in CD3?
Basically all of my life, except when I was at the University of Colorado, University of Denver. But I was born and raised here and moved to Colorado to get my education, came back home, and have voted in every election that I can think of, primarily here.
How many years have you been voting, sir?
Well, I'm 73 years of age, so you can figure when I turned of age, I've been voting since. So.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Which Senate district would you like to discuss?
It's the Senate district right now that I vote in. Yeah, I off the top of the head, I don't got the number, but it's with Senator Pete Campos. What district is that? Pardon?
Senate District 8.
District 8. Okay, if it's District 8, it's been a fairly good fit for people in our area. We've had good representation. Once again, it's a broad-based district for the Senate. It has a conglomerate of people of all ethnic backgrounds, all economic backgrounds, social backgrounds. And it seems that the issues that concern us on the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains are pretty common. And we are definitely pleased with what we've seen in the past with the work of District 8 in our area. And as you can see by your map, it covers a good segment of northeast New Mexico on the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains with Colfax, Mora, Harding, San Miguel, and Guadalupe County.
So you would
Any
like to see it pretty much remain intact?
Pardon me?
You would like to see it pretty much remain intact? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's been like this for ever since I can remember. District 8 has always been in this configuration, and it's been pretty well represented by the people that have been elected to that office of the composite of the people in this district. And I believe they've served as best as they can the district well. So I like to see it remain intact as it is.
Thank you. How about the House District? Which House District?
District 40. Can you show me a map of that one?
Sure.
Thank you.
What's District 40?
Okay. Thank you. Now, District 40 hasn't always been this configuration, okay? I don't know how the district changed. I think it was part of District 70 at one time, and that's where, as a representative, we once again had representation on the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Fairly good. We had representatives from Mora that were elected to the state legislature. We've had representatives from San Miguel County that were elected to the office of state representative. But under this configuration, we're vastly on the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. We are vastly separated by population by the mountains. So basically, whatever happens in Rio Arriba County, population-wise, they can far outweigh any of the votes that we have in Colfax County, Mora County, or even parts of San Miguel County. So and Pecos. So I've experienced both. Okay, we've had good representations in the past after the redistricting of 40, and we've had some poor representation. Okay, a representation that didn't really fit into the needs of the culture of the people and the economics of the people on this side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So I would like to see a configuration, and I can't say that all, because we've had a good representative from that side of the mountain that really represented District 40, but that's 1 out of 3. Okay. So I don't think that's a good, for such a short period of time. If that's the type of representation the people of Mora and the eastern side of the San Cristo Mountains are going to get, and at 33% favorable, I would find that a redistricting on that should be configured to align itself to the previous districts that we had in the past. And let me emphasize that out of the 3 representatives that we've had in District 40 since the reconfiguration, only 1 has really represented the people of Mora in our communities on this side of the eastern side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. So that's not what I would say is fair districting based on population, vote, ethnically, culturally, we have a lot in common. The values are somewhat similar. Issues of water and land, forest and so forth are similar. But I think we need to relook at that district very seriously.
You have certain boundaries in mind?
We go back to the original boundary prior to 40. I think that would be the boundary I would like to see, because there we had representation from our area in common thoughts and common direction, common economics.
Mr. Quintana, just a moment. This is Lisa Curtis. I just want to ask you a question, Brian Sandra. Where was the old boundary for 40?
The reason.
Pardon?
I totally understand you picked up populations. Okay, but I mean.
There's another big reason why people are talking about the old boundaries that they liked and the new boundaries that they don't. And it goes beyond just the population loss. In the 10 years ago, the judge made the determination that north central / northeastern New Mexico did not have sufficient population to maintain the number of seats. So a district that was in north central / northeastern New Mexico was eliminated, and it ended up in Rio Rancho, where the population could accommodate it. And so that made a major shift in all the boundaries that we're talking about here. So as the gentleman is saying, what does Mota County have to do with going into Pecos or Espanola? It's because when that seat was eliminated, all the districts had to move toward the extra population that was still sitting there. So it caused this issue.
But I can't really see that in perspective, that the Las Vegas community, which is the biggest populated community now in District 70, was pulled out of our district and put into 40 was excluded. So Las Vegas is a big pool of population, has good educational facilities, got good employment. And a lot of the people here in our area, in our communities, work in the Las Vegas area, but we were taken out of the Las Vegas pool, and that was a significant loss of population.
Any other questions for Mr. Quintana? Mrs. Quintana, did you want to speak to the committee?
No, thank you. I yield my time to Mr. Quintana. Thank you.
Okay, I saw your name on the screen, so I just wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've discussed this here as a family, and we both feel pretty comfortable on that issue. And I think if there's any way that the reconfiguration comes up again, that as best as possible, the Las Vegas community be pulled back into that district to get the population numbers that you need. If it's an issue around population, and I mean, I sympathize with maybe Rio Rancho and those bigger communities can do like they've done in the past, have enough votes there, enough people there to satisfy their needs for our district, you know. They have more in common with each other than they have with us, okay? Even though a lot of our friends and relatives have moved to the bigger cities like Rio Rancho and Albuquerque and so forth, but many of us stay here, and the mindset here is much different than the mindset there. We dealing with agricultural, acequias, drought, forestry, the cattle industry, so on and so forth. So it's a different mindset. You could say you're from Mora, but living here in Mora is much different than being from Mora and living in Rio Rancho, okay?
Very true.
Or Roswell or wherever, because we're all over the place.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Quintana.
Well, thank you so much. I wish you well on your task.
Appreciate it.
Okay, stay well.
You too. Sunny, any other hands up on Zoom?
Justice Chavez, not at the moment. We can go ahead and lower Mr. Quintana's hand. Again, if folks would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen and I'll call on you. Otherwise, if you're on the phone, press *9.
Justice Chavez, may I give a reminder to Mr. Quintana about the mapping?
Sure.
Mr. Quintana, if you're interested in drawing the way that you think the maps make more sense, there's on the website, you'll notice the Districtor software, and you can go in there and play with Districtors. So you can title it and say kind of what area you're referring to. And then there's also a place for comments where you can remind us those needs and interests that you want to make sure that you're trying to address by the way that you're redrawing the map. And that'll help. I mean, everybody's been listening quite well to you and taking good notes. But if you think it would be helpful to draw it out for us, that would, we really appreciate that kind of input as well. And you're welcome to do both.
Well, committee, I pretty much let the public dictate the agenda. But we could go back now, and Brian, if you wanted to put up some maps, we could talk about some of the challenges that we're facing. Like to do that.
Mr. Chairman, do we want to go through the portal suggestions that have come since the last meeting?
Yeah, update us on what's come out on the portal and give us your thoughts.
Okay. What, you can say where we start, you want to start with Congress? Okay, so on the portal, since we met last, a number of people have offered suggestions. And there was one suggestion for Congress. And we can see first in what this commenter said, that the current congressional district split counties way too much. Bernalillo County is split a lot. And the first congressional district is Bernalillo County plus parts of 4 other counties. To the extent feasible, the borders of Bernalillo County and CD1 should align. If more population is needed for Bernalillo County to be its own congressional district, then the population should come from one other county. So this person is an advocate of keeping Bernalillo County whole in a congressional district. And then if you need more population, to try to add a whole new county. Well, Bernalillo County doesn't have enough population for a whole district. And it would need to pick up maybe 24,000 more people estimated to get that ideal population. Torrance County has 15,000, that wouldn't be enough if you're trying to keep it whole. Valencia County has too many. But the concept that she has is criticizing the fact that Bernalillo County is split and it includes too many other places. So let's talk about what those other places are and remind everybody, what is the first congressional district? Well, so we have here on the screen an overlay between what our person who suggested keeping Bernalillo County whole, and then Brittany put up the existing boundaries for District 1. So we see that District 1 also includes all of Torrance County, okay? So Bernalillo County is all of Torrance County. You're looking at the black highlight. And then the commenter suggested that Bernalillo County is split, and they don't like that idea. Notice that in the area, it's blue, right? The highlight of Bernalillo County, that the black line there, which takes part of Bernalillo County outside of the first congressional district. That's actually the Isleta precinct. So Isleta is 2/3 Valencia County and 1/3 Bernalillo County. At the time, 10 years ago, as Letta said, we don't mind being in the 2nd congressional district, but whatever you do, don't split us between the 2 counties. Keep us Letta whole. So what you're looking at there on the part of Bernalillo County that actually goes south, that's the Bernalillo County precinct for Sloan. Why is it so big? Because back then that precinct was so big, it actually included Mesa del Sol. At the time, there were 3 people living. We've since then fixed that precinct. It doesn't look that big, but basically that's the Isleta precinct. Notice, and you've seen it before, or we talked about Torrance County. Look where Los Lunas is located there. And notice we talked about it before, that not only is Torrance County in CD1, but this sliver of Valencia County is also in CD1, Meadow Lake area. That goes back to 1991, when rather than a sliver from Valencia County being in CD1, it was this big. And then the next 2 decades, the judge said, well, I want to pass a least change plan. So we kept on lowering the percentage of Valencia County that's in CD1 to get the populations identical. So at this point, there's only a sliver of CD1, of Valencia County that's in CD1. That would be a candidate for you to consider to put back into Valencia County. Now, if we look above the word Albuquerque, we see a little jig-jag there. That's part of Paradise Hills and Ventana Ranch that actually are in the 3rd congressional district. So the blue that you see is just the Bernalillo County line. The black is the current boundaries that are showing you that part of Paradise Hills and Ventana Ranch are in the 3rd congressional district. That also is something that happened in 1991 that keeps shrinking to just the populations. The judge wanted to make as few changes as possible from 1991 that we didn't eliminate at the time. The judge didn't, the legislature didn't. So that would be a candidate for if this commenter had her way of unifying Bernalillo County and putting that part of Paradise Hills and Ventana Ranch back into Bernalillo County and not in northern New Mexico. Then on the right side, east the blue, east of Bernalillo County, you see there are 2 Edgewood precincts. You had heard a commenter criticize that Edgewood has 2 precincts in CD1 and 2 precincts in another congressional district. Those 2 right there are actually in it, and then above it, Cedar Grove. So really, CD1 includes most of Bernalillo County except Isleta and those Ventana Ranch, Paradise Hills precincts. It includes the town of Bernalillo. So let's go stroll there. So again, the blue is the Bernalillo County line, but the black is the current districts of CD1. So Bernalillo is in CD1 currently, the 2 Edgewood precincts, and then River's Edge 1, 2, and 3. So let's zoom in a little more toward Bernalillo. And notice by the B in Bernalillo to the left of it, that line there is 528. That's the road that goes from Rio Rancho to the town of Bernalillo. And you know, if you're driving on 528 outside of Rio Rancho, heading toward the town of Bernalillo, the casino, you see those 3 communities on the right of the road. River's Edge 1, River's Edge 2, River's Edge 3. Those are in CD1. So Rio Rancho is in the northern district, but River's Edge 1, 2, and 3 are in CD1. The town of Bernalillo is in CD1. Corrales is in with Rio Rancho in CD3. Placitas is in CD1. So when you're working on the edges, you've heard a lot of people talk about a northern and a southern configuration for Congress. If you go with that status quo approach, we'll still have to play on the edges within Albuquerque. Once we figure out what the populations really are, for you to make some adjustments if you want to. Should River's Edge 1, 2, and 3 be with Rio Rancho? Should the Edgewood precincts be, outside of the congressional district or not? And you'll be working on those edges, assuming you end up passing a status quo plan, basically north, south, and Albuquerque. If, of course, you go with a more dramatic plan with the east-west configuration, we'd still have to play making adjustments in this Albuquerque area to get all the populations to work.
I don't know how to not ask you these questions that I know you can't answer exactly because we're from the membership census, but right, like, what are we anticipating is the population that's going to have to get made up for CB3?
Well, we talked about it briefly. We never put a pencil to it, but just off the top of my head, each congressional district does have an area that's experienced some growth. The Northern Congressional District had nice growth in Rio Rancho. The Albuquerque district, although only 2.89% growth for the county, that's still 2.9% of a big group of people. So the Albuquerque district had some growth. So we're hoping that the populations are not going to be earth-shakingly one where one district's going to have to pick up 40,000 more. They all have a center of pop. Remember, Eastern New Mexico was the big loser, but Eastern New Mexico, the northern half is with the Northern District, and then the southern half has Leonetti. It's not a problem. So even though northeastern New Mexico has seen this percentage of a loss of population, that's going to affect those legislative districts more than it's going to affect, some statewide number. Tobacco County loses 17% of its population, is still 400 people. So you
don't think, so the short answer to my question is you don't think there's going to be a change?
I don't think the variations are going to be that dramatic. You'll probably be more focused on what adjustments you want to make and fine tune. And then let's look at just this PDF of and let's just remind ourselves of the statewide look of the congressional districts, just to remind ourselves of that. So of course, the Northern District, the Southern District, and Albuquerque. We just went over the Albuquerque Torrance District and the status with great detail. What about the rest of it? Well, currently, notice McKinley County, and notice how the county line is actually split down over here. The reason for that is the Zuni Pueblo goes from McKinley County and into Cibola County. So actually that county split allows all of Zuni Pueblo to be in the same district. So the county line of McKinley was split, and all of Zuni Pueblo then goes into the Southern District. That was what they said at the time. Don't really care what district we're in, but to keep us whole. So you see that little sliver again in Valencia County. And so at this point in time, Cibola County does go south. And so you have Laguna, Acoma, and Zuni going south. The Cibola County is part of the Southern District. Torrance County is an interesting county. Where does it belong? It's always been an Albuquerque metro. According to the Census Bureau, Albuquerque metro area. It's become more rural, less growth. Some people argue the north, some the south, some people argue Albuquerque. Different perspectives. A lot of people do commute into the I-40 corridor. Notice Clovis goes north, but Portales is the place where we split 2 precincts 10 years ago in the court to get the population. The judge said get the population deviations of no more than 1 person. So a couple of census blocks were split in some precincts in Portales in order to get each one of these districts having the same population. Most of Portales does go into the Northern District, but some of it does. Some of the precincts go into the Southern District. So, I mean, these districts are compact to the extent that we have a Northern and Southern and an Albuquerque, but you will have to make some decisions once we see the population at a minimum on adjusting on the edges, and at a maximum if you want to see more radical change. We saw a couple of people in the last meeting where we showed on the portal where they did come up with plans that did split the congressional districts differently, more in an east-west configuration. One of them also split Albuquerque 3 ways and put Albuquerque in all the districts. The other one kept Albuquerque whole, but did an east-west configuration. And we heard a lot of comments today and in the other meetings about that. You know, it is interesting that you remember back we looked at a training where we showed the percentage of Hispanic population in the north, in the south, and in Albuquerque. Hispanic population in Mexico is distributed pretty equally. What makes northern New Mexico what it is, it's really some of the Hispanic and Native American population that makes it what it is. So we heard one commenter today talk about they'd like to see Hispanic, one of the 3 districts. You know, right now, among the 3 congressional districts using current boundaries and 2010 census data, CD1 is 43% adult Hispanic. CD2 is 47% adult Hispanic. CD3 is only 36%. So why is CD3 only 36% in the Northern District? It's because the North is, what makes it unique is the sum of the Native American and the Hispanic. All 3 districts are a majority minority. Percent white, non-Spanish white in CD1 is 47%. And CD2 is 45%. And then CD3 is 44%. I just rounded it up to the closest whole number. So all 3 districts are a majority minority. None of them are majority Hispanic. To make it Hispanic would take one of those east-west configurations of somehow getting Santa Fe and maybe Rio Arriba in there with Lee County, or some way of doing more of that east-west thing to get it up to a full majority voting age pop. Couldn't go up the west side to get a majority Hispanic because there'd be too many Native Americans to get majority Hispanic. You'd have to go up this way. But they're all majority minority. But I found it interesting how many people had strong feelings about that wherever we've gone. I've never heard so much talk about migration streams between Rio Arriba County and Rio Rancho.
We heard about migration here today too.
Yeah, both places. So basically what we did was we took that one comment that said, keep Bernalillo County whole for CD1, and we segued into going over what that district is in more detail. So if we can move on now,
Let me ask Robert and Joaquin if you have any questions.
No questions, but just a moment to acknowledge how helpful Brian's knowledge of the history of these lines is to this process. I was just imagining what this would be like without him. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Robert, so you know, I made a comment during the break that he needs to dump his brain into something so that we all have this going forward too. You might want Ken being our helper someday.
Brittany and Michael are absorbing everything so they can do it next time. On that topic, in 1980, before we had 3 congressional seats, we gained the 3rd congressional seat in 1982. And so then it became Albuquerque North and South. But before that, 1980, when we only had 2 congressional seats, San Juan County, McKinley, gas and oil country wrapped around the whole west side and went to Lee County. Lee County and San Juan County were in the same district. It was an L. And then Albuquerque was with northern New Mexico. Manuel Lujan would get elected in an Albuquerque, northern New Mexico seat as a Republican. And then we would have Harold Reynolds get elected as an oil man from Hobbs, New Mexico.
You got oil and gas, right?
Both sides had oil. That was the common interest, that oil on both sides.
Any more questions on congressional maps?
Okay. Let's just.
Are there any proposed maps on district for Senate or House?
Yeah. We'll do Senate. Let's start with Senate 18. So this Senate 18, the author of this suggestion, her stated goal was just trying to make the map more compact shape. So Senate 18 is in the middle of the heights. If we can zoom in a little more. And so notice that we're going to look at the blue, which is what her suggestion is for Senate District 18. And notice that on the western boundary of the blue, how we have a straight line on Wyoming Boulevard. That is the western boundary of Senate District 18. And notice that there are a few precincts that are swapped on the southern end of the district. The southern end of that district, I think, is Constitution. So what this suggestion is to add a couple of precincts to the southwestern corner of this district and take away a few on the southeastern corner to straighten out the boundary lines so that Wyoming is straight. And that's pretty much what it does. It straightens out the boundary of Wyoming by swapping a few precincts on the southern end of the district bordering on Constitution. Now, and it does, you know, the Northeast Heights, both on the House and Senate, does have a lot of squiggly lines. And it's something you're going to need to think about. This particular, notice how the northern district line is very compact on Academy. That's the way it was before, and this person kept it. And so, but for the fun of it, Michael Sharp this morning ran this district through the different compactness measures. That the ones that have been bantered about most by the Redistricting Task Force and others. And as we've said before on compactness, each compactness measure calculates it differently. And they all have their strengths and weaknesses or their priorities. So under one of the compactness measures that's been talked about the most, it showed that this district was less compact than the current. And in the other formula, it showed it more compact. Compactness measures that reward straight lines, it found this district is more compact. So if you're really focusing on putting the legislative districts on Wyoming and Academy, not going all up the nice squiggly lines, a particular compactness measure will reward that. The other one that draws a circle around the district and looks at the blank space in between on a ratio, Brittany can explain it better than me, to measure compactness, that one rewarded the current district. So I guess when we look at compactness measures, we'll look for ones that both reward it rather than them disagreeing with each other. But we just figured we'd share that with you. District 16, Senate District 16. Now, Colton Dean suggested, submitted this. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about the international district. And the international district has about 30,000 people. A Senate district has 50,000 people. So this person was going to draw an international district with 30,000, but build it up into a Senate district with 50,000. So it goes beyond the San Mateo and Wyoming boundaries. It actually goes east of the west of the San Mateo boundaries and east of the Wyoming boundaries to pick up 50,000 people. But you can see it's north of Lomas and North, which is the definition of the international district. San Mateo, it is wholly contained in it, as is Wyoming. So it just goes beyond the boundaries, but it's, and it was pointed out to me that for some reason, the submitter did not include the Kirtland Air Force Base in the international district, brought it to without it. So again, we know you're grappling with issues. So we also, for the fun of it, took a look at whether this international district does pair any legislators. And it turned out that it does pair 2 legislators. So then we looked deeper, and remember what we said, it's going west of the San Mateo to pick up 50,000 people. It's going east of Wyoming to pick up 50,000. It turned out that once we put on the list of where everyone lives, and it does pair 2, it just paired it by 1 precinct. And the pairing was in a part of the district that did not affect the integrity of the international district. And so one of the senators could have conceivably been put back into her district without affecting the integrity of the author's desires. So that would be a happy story where sometimes you could develop a good-looking district, look to see if there's a pairing. And if one of your objectives, according to your rules, is to consider avoiding pairing when it doesn't hurt communities of interest. In this case, that could have been done by just swapping out 1 precinct, but that 1 precinct is west of San Mateo, so it wouldn't affect the international district at all. So we did that just to give you some insights.
So I just want to make sure I can see the map right, which is what I was going to ask. So on the right-hand side, on the eastern side, that's Fort Hills?
No, Fort Hills is still further east.
East. Okay,
So
what is that top boundary? I'm not.
It goes to Eubank and then to Wantabo on the edge. I think this is Eubank here, and then Wantabo is here. Wantabo is there, and then Eubank is here, right? Yeah. So the boundary, yeah, so that's my point. It's going way beyond Wyoming, but it has to get to 50,000 people.
I'm just thinking about the community of interest issues around those neighborhoods.
Right, it's starting to, yeah, it does not go as far as Fort Hills. It does include, I think, a couple mobile home parks that I guess one could argue would be fitting. But not to Fort Hills. It's possible it could should have taken in the air base and then backed off from Wantabo and maybe gotten only to Eubank and then put in the air base. That would be an idea. Those are the kind of things that somebody comes up with an idea, then we fiddle with it and then come to you and say, which do you like? But you can see the air base is not in it, and that would be 3,700 people, so it could probably bring it back to Eubank rather than Wantabo.
So if I'm understanding this person's presentation, is that currently the community of interest that is the international district is split between 2 Senate districts, and this is how to make it 1?
I think that the intent of this submitter was to draw a Senate district that included the international district. They probably didn't even know that people were paired. So I think their just intent was keep the international district in a Senate. What would a Senate district look like that would include the international district? And they were forced to go beyond the boundaries of it to get to 50,000. That's an assumption on our part. They didn't lay out their whole intent. And then we looked after just to see, as an example, whether somebody got paired. They did, but it was fixable in this example. But that other person will have a very different Senate district though, because this would have, they'd be unpaired, but it would have. If you do an international Senate district, it's going to affect 4 or 5 other Senate districts around it. Just like any major changes. But, there's a Senate district right now that includes most of the international district. It's not that dramatically different from this one.
The only question, I guess, for the community is Do they just want one representative? Is it ineffective now because they have more than one, or are they being ignored?
Right. Sometimes people say I'd rather have two voices rather than packed into one.
Unless neither one listens to them.
Yeah, unless no one listens to them. Right? Yeah, no, that's a debate that goes on forever, especially with county commissions.
Well, the international district, just because of the minority, is, in Albuquerque, the only Asian community. Whether there's a VRA issue in that or not.
There wouldn't be a VRA issue. Because they could never get enough numbers to elect a candidate of their choice. But it would be a community of interest issue.
Or an opportunity to elect issue?
It would be, yeah, if they could prove legally that they vote cohesively with the other minorities, then you can add them all together. But what's the percentage Senator numbers?
46, 47.
It's easier to get a Hispanic House district that includes the international district and the Senate district. Yeah, you have to spread your wings. But yeah, no, keeping intact the higher proportion Asian communities, absolutely something worthy of consideration in terms of communities of interest. I mean, that's how the international district builds itself. It's just a potpourri of different racial and ethnic groups. And, sure. So that was that one. Those were the two Senate, and then on the House, House 19 is fine. Colton Dean also submitted a plan that would, his version of what a House district would look like if one encapsulated the international district. So this district conforms closely to international district boundaries. And it goes past Wyoming, which is the boundary, to Eubank, just to pick up enough population. So it's easier to conform a House district to the international district only because their populations match up better. And again, we don't know the exact populations, but this one is pretty close, 31,000 people is going to be pretty close to them. But again, that's 2010 census, but international district under these boundaries. So you're seeing San Mateo as a boundary, but it goes as far as Eubank just to pick up more population. Okay. And notice Lomas on down. So it's Lomas to Gibson, just like people have been defining the international district. Lomas on the north end, Gibson on the south end. Comment? Okay, House 27 is another individual, Maureen Scout, and her stated goal was to make the district more compact. And so House 27, that's getting a little further up into the Northeast Heights. I don't think anyone would mind me saying Larry Larrañaga, who passed away, and represented House District 27 for many years. And so notice that it straightens the northern border a bit, rather than the northern border bouncing around a lot. And it, rather than going up to Paseo del Norte, see where that black boundary is, doesn't include those precincts anymore. It just goes up to San Francisco rather than Paseo, and also to San Antonio over there. So it's straightening out the northern boundary rather than the jig-jag district you see in the black boundary. And also it straightens out the southern border. Look at the southern border on Osuna rather than you see the black jig-jag adding another precinct that it had prior to it. That was the stated objective, just to straighten out put the legislative district boundaries on main thoroughfares.
There's population change in that area for sure.
Right. And so we'll wait and see what it looks like. But this person was working with current boundaries and 2010 census. Okay. Shall we do the two communities of interest one? We had two communities of interest ones that could apply to House or Senate. Maureen, again, the same submitter, suggested that when building House or Senate districts, to keep in mind that there's one area south of Academy and east of Eubank. Here we go. South of Academy and east of Eubank. So you can see there, you see Eubank. It's hugging Eubank, actually. There are a lot of apartments there hugging Eubank. And there are a lot of apartments hugging Academy and all the areas in between. What this submitter is saying is these areas as apartments, higher mobility, special needs, not very super high income, that keep in mind that keep them whole. I guess the implication is that when drawing districts, try to not split it, not try to split that region. Notice, it's just butting up to 10. So without reading too much of it, this person might want those apartments included in a district just south of it, rather than putting it in with 10. That's my assumption in terms of socioeconomic. Okay, and then we had a suggestion on, Rio Rancho, as you know, has been around a long time. And there was an original part of Rio Rancho, and it was just by Southern, west of Unser. And this individual, I think it was Dick Mason, right, Richard Mason? He's just showing the part of Rio Rancho that's north of Southern and east of Unser. And he's basically saying, keep in mind, Rio Rancho is going to get split in legislative districts because there's too much population. So keep in mind that this is the old part of Rio Rancho. All the homes are older, they have more needs, lower income, more diverse racially. He just said, keep that in mind when you're drawing Rio Rancho districts and try not to split them into different districts. And I think on the other spots on the map, that was just an error. He didn't mean, I don't think he meant to highlight Bernalillo or Tanawam or anything. He was just focusing on Rio Rancho according to his title. So that's, it's nice things to hear. And that concludes the portal submissions since the last time we met.
Right. What's the committee's pleasure?
There are no hands on Zoom at the moment.
What's that? No hands up on Zoom?
Then I would move to adjourn, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second. All right. All those in favor of adjourning 6:30, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Joaquin already adjourned.
No, Joaquin.
I said aye.
I think Joaquin's voice.
We'll get home a little earlier.
All right. Good.
Okay.
Drive safely, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks again, Brian.